Without knowing it, when you use popular apps like Venmo, Betterment, YNAB, Acorns, Wise, or even crypto apps like Coinbase, BlockFi, Crypto.com, you've trusted both your financial data and your personal information to a company called Plaid. Plaid? Whatever. In early 2022, it was announced that a $58 million settlement had been reached in a class action lawsuit against Plaid, alleging that the company had gathered more info about you than they actually needed and misled consumers on their sign-in form. I'm not here to discuss the settlement, honestly. I want to ask and hopefully answer three very important questions. First, who is Plaid anyway? Is it safe to give them our data? And finally, what other options do we have? Welcome to All Things Secured. My name's Josh, and today we're taking a closer look at the infrastructure that supports a lot of the fintech or financial technology that has become such an integrated part of our lives. And before you think to yourself, he's not talking about me, I don't use Plaid. Yes, I am talking about you, and more than likely you have used Plaid at least once over the last decade, but even if you've somehow managed to keep your financial data away from their servers, there will come a time when you will be asked by a service you use to connect your bank via Plaid. But before we get into whether or not this is safe and what options you have, if any, to protect yourself, let me explain why a company like Plaid even exists. So let's say you're being fiscally responsible and you want to use a budgeting app like Mint.com or YNAB. Now, this can all be done offline, requiring you to manually input every financial transaction you make, or you can make things a lot more convenient by connecting your budgeting app directly to your bank. When you do this, they can automatically pull new banking and credit card transactions for you to review, categorize, and clear. Now, they can't actually make payments on your behalf, but they do have the ability to view what is happening in your bank. Now, the problem for companies like Mint and YNAB was that connecting directly to your bank was a hassle. I mean, there are tons of different banks, and every bank had its own connection rules or API, which made it almost impossible to provide connections to every bank their customers used. Not to mention the legal liability for collecting and storing your customers' banking data, which was probably a headache. So what Plaid does is work like a middleman between your bank and any other app that wants to see your banking data. When you're using that budgeting app, instead of giving them your bank login and all of your financial data, you're giving it to Plaid instead. They securely store your login information and only give the budgeting app the data that they really need, or at least what they're requesting. So in theory, this sounds really good. I mean, as opposed to handing out your bank login info to every app that asks for it and the risks associated with doing that and them storing that data, you're providing it to one company whose sole job is to protect your information by only giving out what is absolutely necessary. Of course, giving one company that much power over your data is a risk in itself, so that begs the question. I wish I could answer this question with a very easy yes it is or no absolutely not, but as with all things in life, the answer is just a little more nuanced. You see, at least at the time that I'm standing here recording this, Plaid hasn't been hacked. Data hasn't been leaked, and even if it had been, banks have security measures in place to stop a thief from using any stolen logins they might somehow obtain. So, strictly speaking, yes, Plaid is safe to use and convenient. I mean, goodness, that's what makes this service so popular, is just how convenient it is. But this recently settled lawsuit highlights some of the biggest problems. Let me show you what I mean. Let's say that I want to connect my bank to a funding source for Privacy.com, which is the company I use to create disposable virtual credit cards. As I go through the connection process, you'll see exactly what kind of data is being requested. They will need my account number and names, which is understandable, and they even need to know my account balance to make sure that I have enough money in my account for any transactions I'm trying to complete. In this case, it kind of makes sense because Privacy.com is making payments on my behalf and they want to make sure that I have enough money in my account. But honestly, that's between me and my bank. That's what overdraft is for, you know what I mean? But here's where it gets tricky. They also want my bank to give them personally identifiable information, including my full name, my physical address, email address, and even my phone number. Why? And it's not even like I have an option to choose which data I give them, which, if either Plaid or Privacy.com are watching this, that would be my biggest request. I want you to differentiate between which data is absolutely necessary for you to have and that which is optional, and then give me a choice for which optional data I provide. Anyway, Do you see the issues here? Within the settlement of the lawsuit, Plaid admitted no wrongdoing, but they did agree to delete some of the data they already collected on you, to minimize what they collect in the future, and to give us more control going forward. Now, part of this control, at least from what they say, comes from creating an account directly with Plaid. So now they're a B2B company that's trying to give me, as the end user, the option to create my own account. It just doesn't really make sense, but that's what I did. I went ahead and did it. It took me about 10 minutes to get it all set up, and before you go and run and do the same, let me just tell you now, it doesn't give me any extra control. Sure, I can look in and see what data is being shared with an app like Coinbase, for example, but I can't actually control anything. The only control I have is to simply disconnect my app, thereby severing the connection between Coinbase and my bank, which I could have done directly within Coinbase anyway. In other words, when you're dealing with Plaid, it's an all or nothing game. You either give them all your data and allow them to hand over as much information as the app you want to connect requests, or you don't use Plaid at all. You don't really get to choose. So hopefully at this point you're thinking to yourself, I'm not sure I'm willing to trust Plaid with all this data, especially since they seem to have admitted to collecting too much of it in the past. So what are my options? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's continue with Coinbase as an example here. Let's say that I'm logged into my Coinbase account and I'm trying to connect a funding source to the app so that I can add money and invest in crypto. As you can see here, it tells me that of the various options available, connecting my bank account directly is the fastest, and it honestly is the cheapest option. You'll notice that the first thing that opens up is a Plaid connection request. What I've found is that in most cases, when you exit out of this request, you'll be offered the option to manually link your bank account. In this case, you give them only your routing, account number, and name, which is much less information than what Plaid retrieves and provides them. It's basically the same as if I'd given them a voided check. You know what a check is, right? It's that paper thing you used to sign. Never mind. Going back to privacy.com, the process is very similar. Instead of using the Plaid service, which is what would happen if I click that button here, I have the option to connect my debit card instead. Now, obviously, this carries its own risks, but at least I'm able to control my data more. Here's the reality. Plaid equals convenience. No Plaid equals inconvenience. It's as simple as that. Some apps, such as the budgeting apps, won't automatically pull your transactions unless you're using Plaid. Other investing apps I've noticed won't allow for instant funding unless I use Plaid. Otherwise, I'm forced to wait for a couple days for my money to appear in the account. As with pretty much anything related to privacy, it comes down to a decision that you need to make between privacy and convenience, and that delicate balance between the two. I can't make that decision for you, and I won't judge you if you decide that you want to keep using Plaid. In the end, for a company like Plaid that is valued at an estimated $13 billion as of their latest round of funding in 2021, this $58 million settlement is laughable. They get off the hook for any legal liability, and we as consumers might get a few dollars. If you want to make a claim on this settlement, I'll put a link in the below, but it literally might only be a few dollars. The only other people who gain here are the lawyers who have billed hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees during this whole lawsuit. Meanwhile, we, the consumers, are still left wondering how we're supposed to protect our data while still using all of these great finance apps. There is no easy solution, as I've explained here, but it all starts with you being aware of how and with whom you're sharing your data. That, more than anything, is what I hope you've learned from me today. Hey, if you've enjoyed this explanation, please consider subscribing to All Things Secured, and then make sure you watch the latest online and security privacy video right here. Go ahead and click right now.